Mom said you're the most useless child we have. My shocking reply left everyone silent. A Christmas revelation. It was last Christmas, and I was 32 years old. I believed I was finally on the verge of experiencing the perfect family dinner, a moment I'd meticulously planned to unveil 2 pieces of life-altering news. I was newly engaged to David, the love of my life, and I'd just secured a promotion at work, a goal I'd been relentlessly pursuing for 3 years. My heart was a mix of giddy excitement and nervous anticipation. I kept thinking, maybe this time, just maybe, my mother will finally be proud of me. But that evening unfolded in a way I never could have predicted, forever changing the dynamic between us. Looking back, it was likely the most liberating thing that could have happened. To truly understand that night, you have to know my story from the beginning. Growing up, I was Linda, the middle child in a family where that position felt less like a spot and more like a space of perpetual invisibility. My older brother, Michael, was the undisputed golden child, a paragon of virtue and achievement in my mother Patricia's eyes. Today, he's a successful doctor, a fact she never fails to mention. Then there was my younger sister, Karen, the cherished baby of the family, a little princess who could get away with anything. She's a formidable lawyer now, living a life of effortless success. I was caught between them, desperately striving to earn even a sliver of the attention and affection they received so naturally. From my earliest memories, I understood that I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. While Michael was celebrated for bringing home a B, I had to maintain a flawless academic record just to get a brief nod of acknowledgement. When Karen's tantrums and broken objects were labeled as cute self-expression, my slightest show of frustration was deemed disrespectful and in need of an attitude adjustment. Throughout high school, I spent countless hours working at a local grocery store and tutoring younger students. It wasn't about necessity. It was a desperate attempt to prove my worth through financial contribution. I saved every penny to buy my mother thoughtful gifts, jewelry for her birthday, flowers for Mother's Day, and Christmas presents I spent weeks agonizing over. Meanwhile, Michael and Karen would pick up something last minute from the mall, and their gifts were always met with the biggest smiles and longest hugs. College was my escape, my chance at a fresh start. I chose marketing, drawn to its blend of creativity and strategy, the power to craft a story that could connect with people. But when I shared my major with my family, my mother's face fell as if I'd announced a complete failure. "Marketing?" she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "That's not a real career, Linda. That's just playing with pretty pictures. Why can't you be more like Michael and choose something that actually helps people? Or like Karen, something that requires real intelligence and makes a difference?" Her words stung, but I pushed through, graduating with honors and securing a job at a small downtown firm. I climbed the ladder slowly, taking on extra projects and putting in long hours. Every small victory, a new client, a successful campaign, I'd eagerly call home to share the news. The conversations, however, always ended the same way. "That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Michael just got published in another medical journal? Or, Karen just won another case. She's really making a name for herself." For years I kept trying. I sent cards for every holiday, called every week, and remembered every birthday and anniversary. When my parents moved, I spent my entire vacation painting walls and organizing boxes while my siblings were too busy with their important careers. I even dog-sat their German Shepherd, despite my allergies, spending entire weekends sneezing and taking antihistamines. The previous spring, when my dad, Robert, needed emergency gallbladder surgery, I was the one who took time off work to drive him to appointments and sit with my mom for 6 hours in the waiting room. Michael was in surgery himself and Karen was in court, but somehow I was the one who got lectured later for not keeping them both more frequently updated. The worst part wasn't the lack of gratitude. It was the endless, exhausting cycle of comparison. Family dinners became an endurance test, sitting through a one-sided litany of accolades for my siblings' achievements, which were treated like Nobel Prize wins because they came from the golden children. This past fall, however, things in my life finally began to fall into place. David and I, after 2 years of dating, became engaged during a weekend trip to the mountains in October. The ring was simple and perfect, but more importantly, he saw me in a way my family never had. He celebrated my victories, encouraged my creative pursuits, and never made me feel like I had to compete for his attention. Around the same time, my company promoted me to Senior Marketing Coordinator, a position that came with a significant salary increase and the opportunity to lead my own team. It was everything I had worked for, and for the first time in my adult life, I was genuinely proud of myself. I couldn't wait to share both pieces of news with my family at Christmas, convinced that this time, it would be different. Christmas morning started with the familiar comfort of our childhood home. The house was decorated the same way it had been for the past 2 decades. The white lights, the red and gold ornaments, the same angel topping the tree. The scent of cinnamon rolls and coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft strains of Christmas music. I arrived around 10 a.m., my arms full of gifts and my heart a flutter of nervous excitement. David was with his family, but we planned our own celebration for later. My dad greeted me at the door with a warm bear hug. "There's my marketing genius," he said, taking the presents. "How's the new position treating you?" I lit up. "Actually, Dad, I have some really exciting news for everyone. Can't wait to hear it, sweetheart." My mother appeared in the doorway, wearing a red cashmere sweater I'd bought her last year. She looked me up and down with that familiar, critical gaze. "Linda, what on earth are you wearing? That green dress washes you out. And your hair looks like you just rolled out of bed." "Merry Christmas to you too, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "I actually spent an hour on my hair this morning." "You should have spent 2, she retorted, turning back toward the kitchen. "Karen looks absolutely stunning in her new navy suit. You should ask her where she shops." My sister was already in the living room, looking impeccably chic in a tailored navy outfit that likely cost more than my monthly rent. My brother Michael was on the couch, scrolling through his phone in his expensive designer clothes. "Look who finally decided to show up," Karen said with a smirk. "We've been waiting to start presents." I was only 5 minutes late because I'd stopped for gas, but nobody seemed to be listening. The gift exchange unfolded exactly as I expected. Michael gave everyone expensive gift cards, which earned him gushing praise for being so thoughtful and generous. Karen gave our parents a weekend spa getaway, which led to a 20-minute conversation of excited planning. I had spent weeks finding personalized gifts, a vintage medical textbook for Michael, a beautiful leather briefcase for Karen, and a custom photo album for my parents. "Oh, how nice," my mother said, flipping through the album quickly. "This must have taken you some time." "About 40 hours, I said. "I had to scan and restore all the old photos." "That's so sweet. Michael, show everyone that new watch your colleague gave you." Just like that, the conversation moved on. My dad squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "This is beautiful, Linda." "Thank you." But the moment had already passed. As the afternoon wore on, more family members arrived. I found myself in the kitchen, helping my mother with dinner. "The turkey needs to come out in 20 minutes, she instructed. "And someone needs to set the table." "Where's Karen?" "She's in the living room with Grandma Eleanor." "Well, she shouldn't have to worry about kitchen work. She works so hard during the week." I bit my tongue. I worked just as hard, but my efforts were never a factor in these equations. My nerves tightened as dinner approached. I planned to make my announcement during dessert, a moment of relaxed happiness. My fingers kept touching the velvet box in my purse, a constant reminder of the news I carried. But as I watched my mother light up at every mention of Michael's latest cases or Karen's court victories, I began to wonder if I was setting myself up for yet another disappointment. Dinner was served at 3 sharp. The table was set with my mother's finest china, the same pattern she'd used my whole life. The conversation flowed easily around familiar topics: Michael's expanding practice, Karen's promotion to junior partner, my cousin Janet's wedding plans. I participated when spoken to, laughing at my uncle's jokes while waiting for the perfect moment. During a quiet lull, my grandmother spoke up. So, Linda, are you still at that little advertising company? Marketing company, Grandma, I corrected gently. And yes, I am. In fact, I have some exciting news about that. Before I could continue, my mother interjected. Linda thinks making pretty pictures for businesses is a real career. I keep telling her she should go back to school for something more substantial. Marketing is a real career, Mom, I said, trying to stay calm. It's a field that requires a lot of strategy and analysis. I just got promoted to senior coordinator, which means I'll be leading my own team. My Aunt Susan offered a kind, "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said, my heart pounding. "And actually, I have even bigger news than that." I reached into my purse, pulling out the small box. "David proposed," I announced, opening it to reveal the ring. "We're engaged." The reaction was a far cry from what I'd imagined. A moment of silence was followed by polite but subdued congratulations. My father's smile was a genuine source of warmth, and my grandmother squeezed my hand. But my mother's expression remained unchanged, almost bored. "When did this happen?" Karen asked. "In October. We went to the mountains." "October?" my mother said, her voice sharp. "You've been engaged for 2 months and you're just telling us now? That's just typical of you, Linda. So secretive. No wonder we never know what's going on in your life." The familiar sting of criticism, disguised as concern, hit me. "I wanted to tell you in person, Mom," I explained. "I wanted this to be special." "What does David do again?" Michael asked, a question I'd answered multiple times. "He's a high school English teacher." "A teacher?" My mother repeated the word with palpable disdain. "Well, I suppose that's stable employment, at least." She made it clear what she was thinking. Not impressive enough, not successful enough. It didn't matter that David was a kind, intelligent, and wonderful man who treated me like the most important person in his world. "He's a wonderful man," my grandmother said firmly. "When do we get to meet him?" "Soon, I hope," I replied. "We're planning to have dinner next month." "I hope he knows what he's getting into," Karen said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Linda's always been the difficult one." "I'm not difficult," I protested, but my mother was already nodding in agreement. "Linda has always been a challenge," she said, as if I weren't sitting there. "She's never quite figured out how to make things easy on herself or anyone else." The words were a physical blow, but I forced myself to shake them off. My father raised his glass. "To Linda and David. May you be very happy together." A few people half-heartedly joined in, but the moment was awkward and forced. The conversation quickly moved on, leaving me sitting with the ring box, feeling smaller and more insignificant than ever. As dessert was being served, my mother began a glowing recitation of Michael and Karen's achievements. He'd been featured in a medical journal and was being considered for a position at University Hospital. Karen had just won the biggest case of her career and was on the fast track to a partnership. I listened, waiting for someone to circle back to my news, but it never happened. It was as if I'd never spoken. That's when my mother looked directly at me and said the words that would change everything. "You know, Linda, I'm worried about David. I mean, what kind of man proposes to you? You're 32. You work in a job that barely pays the bills. You live in a tiny apartment, and you've never really accomplished anything significant. You're the most useless child we have. I just hope David realizes what he's signing up for before it's too late." The silence was deafening. I felt every pair of eyes on me, waiting for my usual reaction of shrinking back or laughing it off. But for the first time in my life, a different feeling surged within me. It was a cold, pure clarity, a release of 32 years of suppressed frustration. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling, and looked my mother directly in the eyes. "Then stop calling me when you need money," I said, my voice steady and clear. Her face went from confident superiority to genuine shock. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. "I'm talking about the $1,500 I've been sending you every month for the past 2 years to cover your car payments." I'm talking about the $3,000 I gave you last spring for Dad's surgery. I'm talking about the $2,000 I sent to help pay for Karen's bar exam fees because she'd already spent her trust fund on that trip to Europe. I pulled out my phone, opening my banking app with surprisingly steady fingers. Want to see the receipts? I have them all right here. My father stared at my mother, a mixture of confusion and anger on his face. Patricia, is this true? It's not what it sounds like, she said quickly. Linda was just helping out temporarily. Temporarily? I laughed without humor. It's been 2 years, Mom. 2 years of me prioritizing your financial stability over my own. 2 years of me living paycheck to paycheck while you drove a car I was paying for and complained about how useless your daughter is. I turned to Michael, who had gone pale. Remember last Christmas when your student loans went into default? Who do you think paid those off? It wasn't Mom and Dad. It was me. $4,000 I'd been saving for a down payment on a house. Michael looked stunned. Linda, I had no idea. Of course you didn't, because Mom made me promise not to tell anyone. She said it would embarrass you, and that I should just consider it my contribution to the family. My contribution? As if I haven't been contributing my entire adult life. I turned back to my mother. You want to know what kind of man proposes to someone like me? The kind who sees that I've been single-handedly keeping this family financially afloat while working my supposedly meaningless job. The kind who recognizes that maybe, just maybe, I've been sacrificing my own financial security and dreams to take care of everyone else. You're being dramatic, my mother said, trying to regain control. Families help each other. No, Mom, I countered, my voice cracking with emotion. What you do is take my money while telling everyone how worthless I am. What you do is use me as a financial safety net while treating me like an embarrassment. I pushed my chair back from the table. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out exactly how useless I really am because as of today, the Bank of Linda is permanently closed. I walked toward the door. Our family business? I said, turning back one last time. You mean the business where you humiliate me in front of these same people every chance you get? I think they're entitled to know the truth about how this family really operates. My grandmother cleared her throat. Patricia, I am deeply disappointed in you. This young woman has been sacrificing her own financial security for this family, and you've been treating her like she's worthless. That's not just ungrateful, it's cruel. I've watched this girl grow up. My grandmother continued. And she's never been anything but kind, generous, and hardworking. If she's the most useless child you have, Patricia, then you have no idea how to measure a person's worth. My mother made one last attempt to regain control. You're making this sound much worse than it is. We're family. You said I was the most useless child you have. I said, cutting her off. What exactly would you call that? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. It doesn't matter anymore, Mom. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done sacrificing my own happiness for people who don't even see me as a real person. I turned to leave. My wedding is going to be beautiful. David and I are going to build a wonderful life together. Anyone who wants to be part of that life with respect and kindness is welcome. Anyone who doesn't can keep my number for emergencies, but don't expect me to answer. I walked out, leaving behind a table of shocked faces and a mother who was, for the first time, truly speechless. The week following Christmas was a whirlwind of frantic phone calls and messages. David, having flown back early, found me on the couch, still in my dress, staring at my buzzing phone. I can't believe I actually did that. I kept saying. I can, he said gently. I've been waiting for you to stand up to them for 2 years. He held me, reminding me that no apology could ever be too harsh. After the emotional and financial sacrifices I had made, the messages and calls from my family trickled in. My father was the first to call, his voice heavy with genuine regret. I had no idea your mother was asking you for money. I'm so sorry. Michael called, offering to pay me back the student loan money, but I told him it wasn't about the money. It's about the fact that you've been perfectly happy to assume someone else would handle problems while you focused on your career. Karen took 3 days to call, still defensive, but eventually admitted, I guess I never thought about it that way. My mother was the most persistent, leaving increasingly frantic and then manipulative voicemails. It wasn't until December 30th that she finally called and said the words I'd been waiting 32 years to hear. Linda, I was wrong. I'm sorry. She even offered a partial explanation, saying that as a middle child herself, she was harder on me because she saw herself in me and wanted me to be stronger. It wasn't an excuse, but it was the first time she had ever shown me any vulnerability. I laid out my new terms. The money stops. All of it. And the criticism stops, too. Don't try, Mom. Do better. 3 months later, my life had completely changed. The constant financial stress was gone, replaced by savings. David and I opened a joint account and began planning our future. My performance at work improved noticeably, leading to my boss hinting at another promotion. The family dynamic had shifted dramatically. My father, furious about my mother's deception, began working a part-time job to make up for it, and even started attending financial counseling with her. Michael and Karen were forced to confront their own assumptions about family support. Michael made a genuine effort to connect with me, asking, Is there anything you need help with? Anything I can do to support you? The question was simple, but it was the first time either of my siblings had ever asked it. My relationship with my mother was still complicated, but she was trying, catching herself mid-criticism and making an effort to be supportive. The real test came when David and I started planning our wedding. My father enthusiastically threw himself into the process, while my mother mostly kept her opinions to herself. The day of the wedding, my father gave a speech that brought me to tears, publicly acknowledging my kindness, generosity, and resilience. My mother, too, offered a simple but heartfelt apology. But the most important moment came during our first dance. Surrounded by a circle of people who truly cared for us, I realized I was genuinely, completely happy. The months that followed were a revelation. My career flourished in ways I never thought possible. The girl who had been called useless was now running her own department. My father became a true friend, and my grandmother became my closest confidant. My relationship with my mother remained a work in progress. But when I told her I was considering an MBA, she surprised me by saying, That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. You'd be excellent at that. It was a small comment, but it meant the world. One evening, almost a year after my wedding, my mother called. She told me she had run into a neighbor and had found herself talking about my promotion and my new house, telling the woman how proud she was of me. And then I realized, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I don't think I've ever actually told you that. I'm proud of you, Linda. I've always been proud of you, even when I was too stubborn to admit it. It was the conversation I'd been waiting for my entire life, but it came at a time when I no longer needed it to feel complete. How does it feel? David asked me after I hung up. Good, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. But also, I think I would have been okay either way. And that was the real victory. It wasn't that my family had finally learned to treat me with respect, but that I had learned to respect myself enough to demand better. I had learned that financial independence and emotional independence go hand in hand, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop accepting unacceptable behavior. The little girl who had spent her life trying to earn love had finally grown into a woman who knew she was worthy of love just as she was.